Chapter 47. A School Teacher President. When Thomas Woodrow Wilson was 9, he was still having trouble learning his ABCs. When he was 10, he could read, but not well. Some of the people who knew him thought he was not very smart. Did they turn out to be wrong? Woodrow Wilson's parents had faith in their son, but what was even more important, he seemed to have faith in himself. Today we believe he had a learning disability, probably dyslexia, which made it difficult for him to learn to read. In those days, no one understood about learning disabilities. Wilson had to solve his own problems. He did. Sometimes problems can become strengths. If Theodore Roosevelt had not had severe asthma when he was a boy, perhaps he would not have turned into a powerful man who loved the strenuous life. If Woodrow Wilson had been able to read easily, perhaps he would have been less determined to study and learn. Wilson was never able to read quickly, but that didn't stop him from becoming a college professor, president of Princeton University, governor of New Jersey, and president of the United States. "My best training came from my father," he said, when he was growing up. His father was a Presbyterian minister who read aloud to his son and taught him to think clearly and write exactly. He assigned the boy subjects for speeches and essays and gave him suggestions to improve them. Woodrow Wilson became a brilliant speaker and distinguished writer. But the most important thing the Reverend Wilson gave his son was a sure sense of what's right and what is wrong, which guided Woodrow Wilson all his life. He was born in Virginia 4 years before the Civil War began. His family soon moved to Georgia. His earliest memories were of war and grown-up discussions of politics, battles, and democracy. He was the son, grandson, and nephew of ministers. It was expected that Tommy, his childhood name, would become a minister too. But from an early age, it was politics that interested him. When he went to college at Princeton, he signed his letters Woodrow Wilson, Senator from Virginia. It was supposed to be a joke, even though it was what he really wished to become. He wasn't a great student at Princeton, although his writing ability did attract attention. Then he went to law school at the University of Virginia with the hopes of entering politics. But he was shy, and politics was no career for a shy man. So he went back to school, this time to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore to study government and history. He had decided to become a college professor. Finally, he found something he could do well. He became an extraordinary professor. His specialty was government and politics. He thought, wrote, and taught about how the government should be run. He believed in a strong executive branch. Later, he had a chance to put his ideas into practice. He was such a popular professor, it wasn't long before he was asked to be president of Princeton University. Woodrow Wilson was determined to make Princeton one of the best universities in the world. He did just that. People began talking about Princeton's unusual president, and that got him into politics where he had always wanted to be. He ran for governor of New Jersey. The state's government was a mess. Its citizens were disgusted with the corruption. Naturally, the political bosses didn't want to change things, but they wanted people to think things were changing. The bosses wanted a governor who would look good, but whom they could control. Woodrow Wilson seemed perfect. He was well known, and his fine manners made him seem meek. The bosses were sure a college president wouldn't know much about the real world of politics. They thought he would be easy to push around, so they backed him for governor. Were they fooled? Woodrow Wilson had steel in his bones and brains in his head. When he believed he was right, he wouldn't bend or budge. Wilson promised to clean up politics in New Jersey. Then he proceeded to do it. He became a reforming governor. The bosses tried to stop some of his reforms. Wilson spoke out and explained the issues to New Jersey citizens. Remember, he was a great speaker. He asked the people to back him. They did. It was democracy at work. The bosses couldn't believe what was happening. Most were forced to retire. New Jersey became a model state for a while. People everywhere began paying attention to Wilson the politician. In 1912, he was elected President of the United States. He knew just what he wanted to do as president. After all, he had been teaching about the presidency. He thought the president should be a strong leader. He believed in progressive goals. He wanted to improve working conditions, help the farmers with their problems, change the banking system, control monopolies, and lower tariffs. Other leaders had wanted to do those things too, but Congress and the special interests had stopped them. Wilson did exactly what he had done in New Jersey. He explained the issues to the American people. He told them to write their congressman. When the people speak out, Congress listens. When President Wilson explained the issues, American citizens understood and responded. Soon there were new and lower tariffs, a new banking system, and controls on the giant trusts. Wilson did what he had promised. He began to deal with the problem of the differences between rich and poor. He made our democracy reflect the wishes of the people, which was what Thomas Jefferson and James Madison had intended. But Wilson wasn't perfect. He did nothing about the racism that was a poison in America's life. He seemed to accept it. He did not, until late in his life, believe in giving women the vote. Sometimes he was too sure of himself, and he wasn't good at understanding the other side's view of a problem. Wilson's ideas on foreign affairs were different than those of presidents who came just before him. He was not concerned with making America powerful. He was not interested in treaties that gave unfair advantages to American business. He was not an imperialist. He thought that nations, like people, should not be selfish. He believed the United States should help other nations become democratic. Mostly he hoped to stay out of foreign affairs. Woodrow Wilson wanted America to fulfill the vision of the founders. He wanted the United States to be great because it stood for the right things. He was getting things done in the nation when something happened that he hadn't expected. An archduke was assassinated in Europe, which started a war that changed the whole world.